Hi everyone, my name is Uri and I run product management for our CI and CD solution set here at Harness. And in this session, I am very excited to introduce our CI enterprise solution. So before we start, just a little disclaimer. I'm going to talk about a product that we are currently working on. So given that it's still a work in progress, please note that some of the functionality may change based on the feedback we'll get from our customers. So if you want to know more details, please feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to talk more about the things that we are going to see. If you have any question, please use the feature chat, and I can answer all the questions that you have. So a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Uri, and I run product management for our CI and CD products here at Harness. And as some of you know, we recently acquired a drone, which is an amazing CI product. One of the things we really liked in drone is the fact that it is so easy to use. When I evaluated drone, I downloaded it and set it up in less than 2 hours. And that was really impressive, especially when you compare a drone to other CI tools that are in the market, where you need to invest a lot in maintenance and setting it up and make sure that you have all the right libraries. Sometimes you need a whole team just to manage your CI server, and that is definitely not the case with drone. And that is definitely aligned with the vision that we had when we started thinking about building our own CI product. We wanted to make sure that we build a CI product that is so easy to configure that you as a developer won't even feel it is there. You don't have to deal with the configuration and how to set up the right pipeline. Everything will be set up automatically for you. And simplicity is only a part of the things that we wanted to do. We wanted to build a CI product that cannot just automate the build process, because this is something that most of the CI products now can do. But we wanted to build a smart CI product that will know how to build your application based on the code in your repository and the libraries that you're using. It will also know what are the bottlenecks in your build and how to remediate the build so the upcoming cycles will be much more fast and efficient. Also, when it comes to testing, we wanted to build a CI product that have the intelligence of understanding how to reduce the test cycle time so you don't waste too much time on over testing. And we'll talk a lot about testing in this session. We'll also want to make sure that it'll be great to have a CI product that can find holes in your test plan and help you to make sure that you are testing properly the changes that you made in the code. With that, I would like you to meet Harness CI Enterprise, which is actually the first CI solution in the market that is a smart CI. It has the intelligence of knowing how to make sure that each build cycle is fast and based and is adaptive based on the changes that you made in your code. And it also uses some real machine learning techniques to understand how to optimize the test cycle. And of course, along with our CD solution, it provides a complete CI and CD solution with the same graphical interface and same look and feel. Let's talk about some of the key capabilities that we are very excited to build into CI Enterprise. One of the things we are extremely excited about is the ability to optimize the test cycle. It's a well-known fact that tests are the key bottleneck in every build process. And you talk to different dev teams, you understand that we always test too much, but we never test enough. And eventually, we're spending too much time in running tests. And that is very tedious, especially when sometimes not all the tests are actually going to help me to find defects and quality issues in my build. And this is exactly what we would like to do here. What we're doing is building the capability that will help us to understand which tests are more important to run at every given test cycle, which tests are more likely to fail. And we will make sure that we will run these tests at the beginning of every test cycle, so you don't have to wait until the entire test cycle finish to find a failure or a quality issue. The way we do it is we're building a model that correlates between the tests that you have, the code of the application, and the results of these tests from previous test cycle. And we train this model whenever there is a new test cycle to make sure that the correlation and the model is accurate. And then when a new test cycle starts, we query this model to understand which tests are more important to run in this particular test cycle. And we're using several metrics to understand that. The first metric is based on the relationship between the tests and the code that has changed in this particular build. So for example, if we identify that the login code has changed, we will automatically pick up the logging test because it's very important to make sure that we're testing the code that changed. Another metric that we have is based on the historical results of the test that we executed in a previous test cycle. And once we identify that a specific test is flaky, it's not stable, we mark it as such, and we will prioritize the execution of all the flaky tests to run at the beginning of the test cycle to make sure that you get to see the results of these flaky tests at the beginning of the cycle. And the last metric is based on whether a specific test has changed since the previous test cycle, or it's a new test that we never executed. And if we find such a change in a test, we will make sure that we run this test at the beginning of the test cycle as well to make sure that it's working and to make sure that it does not find any quality issues. So by taking the tests that relate to code changes and flaky tests and the test that has changed since the previous execution, we can come up with a subset of tests that are probably more important to run. They are probably, they may fail because they are more risky. And we will make sure that we run these tests at the beginning of every test cycle, so you don't have to wait. So you can fail fast, and you don't have to run a full test cycle until you find quality issues. And you can choose if you want to run the entire test plan or just the subset of the tests that we selected. And even if you decide to run the entire test plan, we will still make sure that we will run the subset of the test that we selected at the beginning of the test cycle. Another thing that we can do is to help you to find gaps in your test plan before the test cycle actually starts. So for example, if you made a change to the login code in your in the current build, and there is no test that can actually cover the login code, we can show it to you before the test cycle starts, so you can make a decision if it makes sense to actually run this test cycle. Because even if you run all the tests that you have, you are still not going to be able to properly test the code that was changed in this build. And think how this can complement code coverage solution. Because a lot of teams are saying, if my code coverage is above a certain threshold, then we're good to go. But if you have 90% code coverage, for example, but the code that has changed is not working and is not properly tested, then the code coverage does not really make sense. So this tool actually help you to understand that you are able to properly test changes that were made in the build. At the end of every test cycle, you will see this report, which will give you a great insight into the quality of the build and the code that was changed. What you can see here is exactly how many tests that we executed and the results of every test. you can see how many tests we skipped because they were not important to run at this test cycle. And we can also show you how much time we saved by not running the tests that we skipped. And we're also working on integration with our continuous efficiency solution that will help you to understand how much we saved in terms of cost by not running the tests that are not important. And think how important it is when it comes to the more advanced tests. I'm not talking about the unit tests, which are, sometimes run very fast and are very cheap. But think about security tests or functional tests that are running much longer, and also the setup of the environment to get them executed can be quite expensive. So, this additional integration can bring a lot of value. So optimizing the test cycle is one of the key things that we're doing to help you to reduce the build runtime and make it more efficient. But we have other things that we're working on to achieve that. One of the things that we're doing is making sure that the images that we're using for the build steps are very efficient, and we have the ability to reuse some of the pods as part of the build execution to make sure that the bootstrap time is very small, and also we're not wasting too many resources. We also have the ability to identify when we can run steps in parallel to accelerate the build runtime. And we give the ability to cache certain libraries that you need at every build cycle, so you don't need to waste time and bandwidth to download all these libraries whenever a new build starts. And we're also doing some work to make sure that we can optimize the size of the image that we build at any given build cycle. So we talked a bit about the intelligence and how we can make the build faster and more efficient. And in some cases, we can even prevent the build from happening because maybe it doesn't make sense to run it. But let's talk about simplicity, which is very important for us as well. So we're building a seamless Git integration. And that basically means that you as a user don't have to do anything besides pointing us to the repository of your code. And we'll take it from there. We'll set up the webhooks. We'll understand which pipelines are needed to build your code based on the libraries and the technology that you are using as part of your development process. And at runtime, you'll get a lot of details about the commits that made it into the current build and the results of the test. So everything will be in a single place with zero configuration. Of course, pipeline as code and the ability to make changes using Git commands is a key part of our design. And the intent is to make it super simple for you to design pipeline using YAML syntax. What we're doing is building a YAML editor with a schema validation that will serve as the IDE for your harness development. So as you design your build pipeline, we can help you during the configuration to make sure that the pipeline is proper, that it's actually going to work. Just like any IDE help you when you start developing the code of your application. So we can show you if there are any missing fields or entities. We can show you what are the allowed values. So you get exactly the same experience that you get when you are using the IDE to develop the code of your application. And when you would like to make changes to the pipeline, you can just create a feature branch, make changes, and then merge the code and the changes of the pipeline using a pull request. It's exactly the same experience and the same process that you have when you make changes to your code. One of the unique things that we're doing in CI Enterprise is providing a graphical interface to build a pipeline. And that can be very useful when you need to design very complex build pipelines. Sometimes it makes sense to start building the pipeline using a graphical canvas, so you can drag and drop and build the different stages and steps that you need for your pipeline using the graphical interface. And you can always toggle between the graphical interface and the YAML editor. So you can start building the pipeline using the graphical interface and then make changes using the YAML editor and vice versa. You can really mix and match and use any approach and any interface that you want in order to build your pipeline. It's important to note that you can use the same graphical interface and YAML editor in both our CI and CD solution. It's going to be exactly the same experience if you're using both products together. And that's going to make it much easier to create a combined CI/CD pipeline. Another thing that we're going to have in CI Enterprise is a CI debugger. And that is a very useful tool that will help you to troubleshoot failure in builds. Think about it that right now when the build fails, you have to dig through thousands of lines of logs until you understand what is the root cause for the failure. Maybe a configuration that was wrong. Now you need to fix it and run another build. And you need to wait 40 minutes, 2 hours, really depending on the build, until you know that you were able to fix the problem. And that can be quite tedious. To make it easier, we are introducing a debugger, which is very similar to the debugger that you have in your IDE and can really help you to investigate the issues. What you can do with the CI debugger is to place breakpoints in different areas of the pipeline. And then when you run the pipeline in debug mode, you can see the values of the variables. You can go inside the container to see the environment. You can manipulate the values of the variables, and you can fix it at debug mode. The same way that you debug the application that you're working on, and that's going to make the whole troubleshooting process much more fast and less tedious. And this is a report that I want to show you that can really help you to understand why builds are slow. It's a trend report that shows you the duration of the build over time. And for each build, you can see the breakdown of the build duration, how long each step and each stage took. So you can see exactly what is the reason that the build took such a long time to complete. Another thing that we do here is we can detect anomalies. For example, in this particular build, we can see that the upload to Artifactory step took 17 minutes, which is significantly longer than it usually takes. So you can understand that that is the reason why the build was so long. Now, we can also help you with troubleshooting. We can help you to understand why the upload to Artifactory took 17 minutes. Maybe it was a network issue, or maybe the size of the image that we created was much larger than normal. All these metrics will be available in the report, so the troubleshooting is very simple and fast. So now let me switch to a lab environment. I want to show you a quick demo of some of the things that we discussed. So here is our GitHub account, and this is the pipeline that we are going to execute. You're going to see this pipeline in its graphical representation shortly in CI Enterprise once we kick off a build. You don't have to use a GitHub UI to design the pipeline. As I said earlier, we're going to have a YAML editor with schema validation that will make it much more simple to build valid pipelines. And of course, you can use the graphical canvas as well. Let's do a quick change here just to kick off the build. I am just going to change the log level. And of course, I can make any other change that I want. I'm going to change it to debug. To debug, and I'm going to write a comment, change log level to debug. Great, so we made a commit. Now let's switch to the UI of a CI enterprise. This is the build that we just generated. We have a lot of information that we're showing here, which is very useful. We'll talk about it in a second. But before that, let's drill into the build itself and see how it looks like. So we kicked off the build, and we finished the git clone, and we just started with a few build commands. Here you can see a live stream of the logs that each step generates. And of course, you can see all the logs and understand if there is any issue or something. If something happens during the log execution, and like errors or test results that is important, we will have the ability to highlight it. So you don't have to look through hundreds or thousands of lines of code. You can see everything here in a much easier way. So this is the build, and again, you can choose if you want to give more real estate to the logs and the console, if this is what is interesting for you, or you can look at the progress of the build in a graphical interface. And here you can see a lot of useful information about the test results and the artifacts that we are building. Now let's go back to the builds view. You can see here all the different builds that we generated, and we show here a lot of useful information. Again, this is the build that we just generated. You can see here the commit that triggered this particular build, and I can actually click on it and see exactly the change that I made directly from CI Enterprise. And of course, you can see that I committed the code directly into the main branch. Another thing that we can see here is a list of all the commits that are new, that we never built them before. If I will expand this panel, you can see the comment that I made earlier when we triggered the build. What you're actually going to see here is not just the last commit, but the list of all the commits, of all the changes that were made that never made it into a previous build. So this gives you a really good context of what is new in this build. What are the fixes and the new features that are going to be built for the first time as part of this build execution. So you know exactly what this build is actually going to bring when you will deploy it. And that is for the demo. And that actually concludes our CI session. I hope it was useful for you. And if you're interested in hearing more about our CI plans and CI enterprise in particular, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to help you. And if you have any question, please use the chat feature, and I'm happy to answer any question that you may have. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.